So earlier we talked about bodhisattvas. In the context of which we talked about Changchup or enlightenment. And in the Mahayana Uttara Tantra of Maitreya it says, the whole text is divided into 7 points, Vajra points. The first 3 refers to the 3 jewels, Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. And then the third one is about Buddha nature. And then qualities of the Buddha, and then the enlightened activities of the Buddhas. So the appearance of a Buddha in a particular world like this, chronologically speaking, we have first the Buddha, and then who becomes enlightened, and then gives teachings on the 4 noble truths, regarding which the Buddha gave teaching on the nature of the 4 noble truths and its function, and then the result. And then through the practice of this teaching, the disciples develop their path within themselves. First, they hear the teaching, the doctrine, and then by practicing it, they develop the experience of the teachings. And therefore, through the development of, once one develops the true path and true cessation within themselves, then they become a Sangha. And so in this way we have a chronological order of the Buddha appearing first, and then that giving rise to the Dharma and the Sangha. And so then we have Sanghas as beings whom we actually take as our role models for practicing the Dharma. And by relying on the Buddha and his teaching and the Sangha, what happens is we develop the experience of the Dharma within ourselves. So regarding the Dharma, what it shows is that the nature of the mind is clarity and awareness. And it also teaches that the same mind is empty of inherent existence. If were the afflictive thoughts and emotions, the negative thoughts and emotions, to have any intrinsic existence, independent existence, then they cannot be overcome from one's mind. But because they arise through causes and conditions, therefore the very nature of the mind is that it can change, transform. And because the mind's basic nature is clarity and or luminous, and therefore that shows that there's the possibility of attaining cessation. So the nature or the reality of the mind, the emptiness of the mind, while the mind is still full of negative thoughts and emotions, is termed as the Buddha nature. And once all the defilements are gone, then you have enlightenment. So because we have this basic nature of the mind, the empty nature of the mind, therefore the different qualities can be gained or developed within the mind. And through that, then one is able to overcome the negativities. And once all the negativities are gone, the defilements are gone, then you develop or attain enlightenment. So what is the significance of that enlightenment? Attaining enlightenment, the significance is that one is equipped with the when one has actually attained both the interest of oneself and others, fulfilled the interest of oneself and others. So this Buddha nature, the empty nature of the mind, is not like developing compassion, but how you develop. So with regard to compassion, what you do is actually the mind itself arises in the form of that state of mind, or the aspect of the mind, compassion or love. Whereas with regard to the emptiness, it's not that the mind is actually arising in the form of that emptiness, but then the mind takes emptiness as its object. And so here you have the emptiness as your object of your meditation, unlike developing compassion, where the mind aspect itself becomes the compassion. So since mind itself is empty of inherent existence, therefore you have to develop the wisdom realizing emptiness. And that's what also is meant by the wisdom observing or focusing on enlightenment. So of course, with regard to liberation or nirvana, moksha, it is also taught in non-Buddhist traditions as well. So if we have to say that the moksha is something we believe in because the Buddha has taught, then there's not much reason in that. But that's not how we should go about with understanding nirvana or moksha, liberation. Then you have to, based on reasoning. Nagarjuna says, by ending karma and delusions or afflictions, then you attain liberation. That liberation comes by applying antidote to the karma and delusions. And so what that in turn indicates is the meditation on the emptiness of the mind. So how do you overcome these karma and delusions which obstruct us from attaining liberation? So since karma arises through afflictive emotions, and that in turn arises through distorted views, you overcome the distorted views. And these in turn are rooted in the grasping or viewing things to have some true or independent existence. And therefore, this is called the reification. And that reification is overcome not by prayers, not through the blessings of the Buddhas in the 10 directions. You cannot overcome this grasping at a true existence. Even through by going making rounds to temples or doing prostrations and making offerings and so forth, we cannot overcome this. And neither the meditation on compassion and love can uproot this. But Nagarjuna says, this reification is put an end by emptiness. So what that means is, when you understand emptiness, then that understanding, that wisdom will eliminate this ignorance. So taking that line in the instrumental case, that is the meaning. but then that same line, the last line where it says it is put to an end by emptiness, rather than saying that, taking that instrumental case, then if you take it to be, to say that it is ended in the mind, then you actually, what that means is the grasping at true existence dissolves into the mind itself, within the mind. So the main obstruction to, or the hindrance for us to attain liberation is the grasping at true existence, or grasping at self, independent existence of self. So when you make, when you put an end to that grasping at true existence of self, then you attain attain liberation. So what you have to try to develop is this firm understanding that things do not exist the way it is seen by this true grasping at true existence, or grasping at the self. And then, having understood and having gained insight into that selflessness, then you develop the deeper insight and true experience into it, and that will reduce this the intensity of the grasping at true existence. And then finally, eventually, what happens is you overcome this grasping at true existence completely, and that's when you attain liberation. And so the significance of what is said as the wisdom to observe or focus on enlightenment makes sense, whereas compassion observes other sentient beings. So for one's own sake, you try to gain the enlightenment, and then in order to help the beings who are limitless, like the expanse of the space, you generate compassion. So in Arya Vimukti Sena's commentary to Ornament for Clear Realization, and the 25,000 lines of Prajnaparamita Sutra, it is said so. So you have to gain in-depth understanding of Buddha Dharma by understanding that these two Vajra points of Buddha nature and enlightenment, as mentioned in Mahayana Uttara Tantra. And Nagarjuna says, whatever is dependently arisen, that is said to be empty. So, which is taught in the Prajnaparamita Sutras. So he says that when the Prajnaparamita Sutra says that things are empty, it doesn't mean that there is nothing. It's not about nihilism, nor is it talking about that things are not found under analysis. But things do exist. The way they exist is by dependence on other factors. And therefore, there is nothing which exists independently. So whether it's inner experiences or the external phenomena that we see, what we actually what happens is when we see them or when we think about them, we seem to have the notion that they have some kind of an independent objective existence, and then we cling on to that kind of a way of appearance. And that, in turn, gives rise to distorted views, and that gives rise to those of the attachment, anger. So the nature of things is such that they are dependent, and therefore they are empty of independent existence. And therefore, emptiness means, Nagarjuna says, as I quote it, says that emptiness means dependent arising. So what this shows also is that things are not independent, but they are dependently designated. So Nagarjuna continues after those two lines. He says that is the designated by dependence, and that is the middle way. That is said to be the middle way. So what we have to understand is that emptiness means that things are dependent. So within dependence, with regard to dependency, we have different levels. Right now what we are talking about is the dependence by designation, by relation or dependence on others. So that means that things do not exist objectively from the basis of the designation. And therefore, what that shows in turn is that they are merely conventionally existent, that we impute the things. And therefore, there is this understanding of dependence by designation. So when you think about the reason why things are dependent by by designation is because things come through causes and conditions. So that's another way of understanding dependence. So things are said to be dependent on causes and conditions because they depend, they arise through dependence on causes and conditions, and therefore the effects it shows that the effects are dependent. So dependence by designation is taught in the Prajnaparamita Sutras. And then that in turn hinges on the understanding that things are dependent on causes and conditions. So this causal dependency is something which is accepted by all the followers of the Buddha. In Buddhism, we say that things don't come without causes and conditions, nor do they come from some permanent cause, or like by the will of God or something like that. But how they come about is through causes and conditions. So this is something which all the Buddhists accept. So if you think further, it's not only the case that effects depend on causes and conditions, but the causes themselves also are dependent on their effects. The very fact that something is called a cause is because of their effects. The cause, if you pick up a cause, that cause itself is an effect of another cause. So it's not a cause by itself, without dependence and without relation to something else. So therefore, something is a cause in relation to its effect. And therefore, when you do this kind of investigation, analysis, then you can find that of course the effects are dependent on cause and their causes, but then the causes themselves are dependent or related to their effect. And so finally what you come down to is that the things are merely designated. They are merely conventional. So the main philosophical thrust of Buddhism is this understanding of interdependence. So in Sanskrit, the term is pratitya samutpada. This is the unique teaching of the Buddha. So Lama Tsongkhapa says, based on this understanding of the teaching of the Buddha on interdependence of things, you cannot find any contradiction in his teaching in terms of the teaching of the dependence. And this also fulfills the interest of all, both the interest of all beings. And Lama Tsongkhapa says he feels delight in this thinking about this teaching. And then there is in Chandrakirti's Prasanapada, there is also the explanation of the things, the mere destruction of things being causes, coming from cause and conditions. So there's this very peculiar term, having ceased. So having ceased, something having ceased means it is dependent on causes and conditions. If that having ceased is something permanent, then it cannot depend on cause and conditions. So mainly the understanding of the deeper understanding of dependency also, I think, hinges on this kind of understanding of having ceased, being an effect. So when we are able to hold on to the understanding that things are merely conventional, that they are established by convention, then we will not have any problem in dealing with the day-to-day experiences. Otherwise, if you hold that the two truths, the ultimate truth, which is emptiness, and the conventional truth, the existence of other things in conventional terms, are like two different things, opposite, like the two the pedals on which the weaver puts their feet. When one is pressed down, the other comes up, and when the other one is pressed down, the other is raised up. It's not like that. So when Lama Tsongkhapa says that the understanding of emptiness gives rise or fulfills the interest of both interest of an individual, which means that the temporary effects as well as the long term. So the temporary ones refers to the attaining higher rebirth by practicing the 10 virtuous actions. So by understanding the causal dependency, you actually put that into practice and to attain higher rebirth. And then by understanding that grasping a true understanding is a distorted view, and that it has a powerful antidote that can overcome it, which is the understanding of selflessness or emptiness. And then you see the possibility of overcoming all these negative emotions and attaining liberation. And so in this way, by understanding in this way, then you grow a very special kind of respect and devotion to the Buddha, being an unsurpassable teacher. And so, when you develop this true, deeper insight into emptiness, the direct insight into emptiness, you have the true path within yourself. And once you develop the true path within yourself, you become a Sangha, so an Arya being. So earlier this morning, we talked about the philosophical, teachings based on philosophical understanding. So with regard to Buddhism, this is how you actually explain, basing yourself on the understanding of the philosophical background of understanding the true nature of things. So, of course, within the followers of Buddhism, there are those of the Vaibhashikas and also the Chittamatrans, but both would be considered to be of inferior faculty, the weaker faculty. But according to Chandarakshita's ornament of the middle way, it says that the beings or the followers with sharp intellect follow the teaching by using reasoning. First, gaining understanding and insight into emptiness, and then gaining the understanding that the possibility, or gaining understanding, gaining insight into the possibility of nirvana through reasoning, and then developing the path within themselves. So, as I explained this morning, how the compassion focuses on sentient beings, we have to develop bodhicitta by actually understanding the enlightenment itself, and then with regard to the development of bodhicitta, there is this practice or the tradition of exchanging oneself with others, and which is taught by Nagarjuna, and also in this text by Shantideva. But then in other system, you look at all sentient beings as having been your mothers or parents, and especially mother, and then understanding their kindness, reflecting on their kindness and repaying their kindness, and then developing affectionate love, and then compassion, and then there is extraordinary resolve, and then finally giving rise to bodhicitta. So the lineage of teachings that has come down to Tibet are usually divided into two. We have the extensive lineage of the extensive path, and then the lineage of the profound view. And then there is a third lineage, which is called the great the lineage of the great the path, conduct. So that refers to developing, mainly developing bodhicitta based on the exchanging and equalizing and exchanging self with others. And so this is a way of developing bodhicitta by someone who has the predisposition for bodhicitta, someone who is of a sharper faculty. So in Tibet, these two systems of developing or cultivating bodhicitta are merged, combined. And so by using that as both the systems, you try to train your mind to cultivate bodhicitta, and then once you have developed to a certain degree, the bodhicitta to a certain degree, then you also make a pledge to keep this bodhicitta until you become enlightened, and following some kind of a ritual. And then once you develop further and courage to actually engage in the bodhisattva practices, then you take bodhisattva vows. So by taking bodhisattva vows, you have to keep bodhisattva precepts or the vows. So in order to do that, you have to cultivate mindfulness and introspection. What you need to avoid, what you need to actually keep. And so without knowing the vows, you will not be able to keep them. So you have to know them, understand them, and then keep them in mind, and with mindfulness, and not forget them. And then with introspection, you keep vigil on yourself, whether you are going against the vows or not, whether you are actually indulging in things that you should not do. or not. It's checked by the alertness or vigilance or introspection. So in order to develop that, the main factor you need is what is known as heedfulness. Thinking that I am a Buddhist, I should not harm others, and I'm a religious person. I believe I'm a believer. For example, if you are a Christian, you can think that I'm a Christian, therefore I should not harm others, I should not lie to others. And that's how you actually practice heedfulness or conscientiousness. And similarly for Muslims, you can say, think that you are a follower of Allah, and therefore you should not harm others and deceive others. And so that's how you actually show conscientiousness. And then, with regard to Buddhists, if you are a monk or a nun, you should remind yourself of being a monastic. Thinking, even in dreams, you should be able to think that I am a follower of the Buddha. I have this taken the vows of a monk or a nun, and then show conscientiousness. So why you become reckless is because of our negative thoughts and emotions, the disturbing emotions. So you have to understand the workings of these disturbing emotions and overcome them. And then there is another factor by which you also go against the vows, which is disrespect or disregard. You should be mindful that all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are always watching you, and and pay your respect. Be respectful to them, and therefore you avoid causing a downfall to your vows. And then another cause for going against vows is recklessness. As it said in those 8 verses, may I improve myself, my mind, at all times and in all my conduct. Because the moment they arise, they disturb myself and others. So one of the Kadamba Geshes has said that I do not know much Dharma, but what I know to do is that I need to be mindful of these disturbing emotions. And when the disturbing emotions are actually becoming more alert, then I also become alert. And when they lose their strength or when they are more careless, then I also become careless. So something like that. So otherwise, so now let's go through the text. 5th chapter is on page 34. Verse number 1. Verse number 2. verse 3. So what these verses show is that having developed bodhicitta, having generated bodhicitta, although it has so much benefit, this bodhicitta, which is very beneficial, in order to develop it further, one has to practice the bodhisattva vows. You have to keep the bodhisattva vows in your practice. So what is meant by keeping the vows, it should not be like you are bound by ropes or you are imprisoned by the vows. In the Pratimoksha vows, in the Mulasarvastivada tradition, the bhikshus keep 253 vows, whereas in the Theravada they have 220 something. So these Pratimoksha vows have to do mainly with the physical, restraining physical and verbal negative actions, whereas the Bodhisattva vow has to do mainly with restraining the mental negative actions. And the primary thing is to avoid selfish motive. So with regard to the Pratimoksha vows, of course, if someone were put in prison, of course, the person may not go against their vows because they have to mainly to do with physical and verbal actions. Whereas with regard to the Bodhisattva practice, in the context of Bodhisattva practice, even if someone is imprisoned, the mind can think lots of things. So if the mind is not subdued, it says, it is in this world unsubdued and crazed elephants are incapable of causing such harms. But it says, if you let this mad elephant loose, then it can harm yourself. By harming others, it will cause you to fall in lower realms of existence for eons and eons. And therefore, you have to be mindful and remind yourself of what you should and should not do. And doing that, all fears will cease to exist and all virtues will come into your hands. So in the verse number 4, tigers, lions, elephants, bears, snake, and all forms of enemies, the guardians of the hell worlds, or evil spirits and cannibals, will all be bound by binding my mind alone and will all be subdued by subduing my mind alone. Of course, when you're physically challenged, you're physically threatened, then, of course, even if you may have a good thought, it may not be so nice. For example, if you were being bitten by a mad dog, a rabid dog, and you should not let it bite you. Of course, physical pain comes, may be affected by external factors, but then mental pain comes mainly through all kinds of unnecessary thinking. So to make a difference, you have to make a difference in your thinking. So lots of mental unhappiness, mental pain comes through your way of thinking. So when you think, when your perception changes, it'll change your experience of how you look at something which otherwise may cause harm, unhappiness. So if you have the true peace of mind, then even if the whole world were to rise against you, you cannot be shaken from your peace of mind. So our unhappiness mainly comes from all kinds of thought processes that are going on in our mind. The perfect teacher himself has shown that in this way all fears as well as all boundless miseries originate from the mind. Now verse number 7, who intentionally created all the so in certain texts there's so with regard to these lines, I checked with Kunu Lama Rinpoche, and the Kunu Lama Tenzin Gyaltsen clarified to me that the Sanskrit text reads motsok, which refers to kind of weapons of sharp weapons. So in certain texts there is the mention of me or fire, so that's not right. So with regard to the world, how they have arisen, how it has evolved, and how long it will stay and so remain, it has to do with external elements, of course. But then we also have external elements, the 5 elements within ourselves. So maybe we could say there is some kind of an interaction between, some kind of a link between the internal 5 elements and the external 5 elements. So we talk about the wind energy with the 5 kinds of light. These may have something to do with the external world as well. So in Abhidhamma Kosha, it is said that the varieties of worlds come from karma. So we have to think about it. How this external world, the inanimate things, the matter, come about through karma. So perhaps it could be explained in more precisely based on Tantra. And in Mahayana Uttara Tantra also there is mention of the evolution and the devolution of the 5 elements, beginning with space, and then dissolving back into space in the end. So it seems to me that there is some connection between the internal elements and the external elements. So in Bodhisattva Charyavatara also there is mention of the color and the form or the shape of lotus comes from their own causes. So where does the cause of these lotus come from? It says it comes from its own previous cause. And then it goes on to say that in the beginningless happiness and suffering come from their causes, which is karma. So perhaps we can think there's something that we can actually gain insight into by thinking along these lines, which of Bodhisattva Charyavatara. So this consciousness has its cause in a previous moment of consciousness. Whether we talk about the physical karma or not, but we can still talk about the mental karma. So Shantideva says this beginningless suffering and happiness come from the karma. So in the external world, we can actually talk about the evolution. So with regard to animals and human beings, we talk about evolution. Of course, that may work. But then with regard to the external world, the dwellings, and how do they arise through karma? It's quite complex. Who created the burning iron ground from the way all in the hell ensue. The Mighty One has said, verse number 8, that all such things are the workings of a negative karma. Hence, within the three world spheres, there is nothing to fear other than my mind. So all our problems come from undisciplined mind, which in turn is rooted in the viewing that things have some kind of independent existence, and then we cause harm to others because of lack of bodhicitta. And so all these because of the very gross forms of disturbing emotions, we have attachment and aversion, and then create karma, and then those strong, grave karmas lead us to be born in lower realms of existence. Whereas through certain other karmas, we are led into higher forms of existence. So all these samsaric existences come from undisciplined mind. But then once this undisciplined mind is subdued or overcome, what you gain is that of liberation. And then by overcoming the defilements completely from one's mind, by practicing understanding of, or by developing understanding of emptiness and the bodhicitta, you reach Buddhahood. So everything in the samsara comes from the undisciplined mind. So if the perfection, verse number 9, if the perfection of generosity were the alleviation of the world's poverty, then since beings are still starving now, in what manner did the previous Buddhas perfect it? Verse number 10, if the perfection of generosity with regard to it, those who are on the level of trainees can also be said to have developed this perfection of generosity, whereas the perfection of itself comes at the end as the resultant, the result when you attain Buddhahood. But then those who are like on the path of the Arya beings are said to have reached that perfection in the sense that they are in the process of reaching it. So the perfection of wisdom, perfection of generosity doesn't mean that the world should be empty of any poor people who are destitute. But so when you dedicate all your virtues for the benefit of others, that sense of giving your, when that is perfected, then that is called perfection of generosity. Hence, it is simply the state of mind, it says. So what this shows is that everything is based on the mind. nowhere has the killing of fish and other creatures has been eradicated. For the attainment of merely the thought of to forsake such things is explained as the perfection of moral discipline. So, of course, there are people who harm others, there are beings who harm others. So the question here, the calm that is raised here is that the Buddhas have not reached perfection of morality. So the answer here is given in the last two lines. So you restrained yourself and not harm others, and then perfect morality. And then verse number 12, unruly beings are unlimited as space. They cannot possibly all be overcome. However, if I overcome thoughts of anger alone, this will be equivalent to vanquishing all foes. So perfection of patience doesn't mean that there is no more any kind of rivalries, your rivals and so forth. But what it means is that when you harm others, there is somebody who actually harms you and you try to retaliate. So verse number 13, where would I possibly find enough leather with which to cover the surface of the earth? Yet wearing leather just on the soles of my shoes is equivalent to covering the earth with it. So perfection of patience doesn't mean that there is no more beings who harm you or adversaries. But when you have overcome your anger or aversion towards others completely, so that's when you have perfected the practice of patience. So this is that you will not find enough leather to cover this whole earth. But then, if you wear a piece of leather on the sole of your shoes or foot, then that will be equivalent to covering the whole earth. Likewise, it is not possible for me to restrain the external course of things, but should I restrain this mind of mine, what would be the end to restrain all else? Need to restrain all. Verse number 15 also read. So even if you have developed concentration, single-pointed concentration, for example, like the actual concentration leading you to the higher form realm, it can result in taking birth in Brahma realm and so forth. Physical and vocal actions cannot so result when accompanied by weak mental conduct. So of the three kinds of virtues, the physical, verbal, and mental, the mental is the most powerful. Blessing or for tea. Somebody didn't get tea, it seems. Nani geji nangbe chongdo dilile choba di kala. The Lord reality has said that even if recitation and physical hardships are practiced for long periods of time, such as fasting, physical hardships such as fasting, or if you do all kinds of practices for long periods of time, they will be meaningless if the mind is distracted elsewhere. So this is true. So with regard to cultivation of renunciation, cultivation of wisdom, realizing emptiness, and then deity yoga practices, recitation of mantras, which have to do within the practice of deity yoga. So if there's no concentration, then it's just mere prayers. You're just doing the ritual. Beginning in tantric practice, the sadhanas begin with the line, everything dissolves into emptiness, and then the rest. Otherwise, without concentration, your mind is distracted everywhere. And therefore, of course, cultivation of single-pointed concentration is not something unique to Buddhism, but then it is indispensable. "17. Even those who wish to find happiness and overcome misery will wander with no aim, no meaning, if they do not comprehend the secret of the mind, the paramount significance of Dharma." So training of mind, the secret of mind here refers to perhaps this kind of thing also, but mainly that the nature of the mind being empty of inherent existence. It's not only that you're enough to see the conventional nature of the mind, the conventional aspects, but also you should see the ultimate nature of the mind, without which, it says, "This being so, I shall hold..." So, of course, even in the non-Buddhist practices, there are meditations of looking at the nature of the mind, the clarity nature of the mind. So, within their practice, there are practitioners in the non-Buddhist traditions who may have reached the certain level of overcoming the gross states of negative disturbing emotions. That without the understanding of emptiness of the mind, there's no way one can reach moksha, liberation. So that is perhaps being said here. So up to this, what is shown is that even while you are in samsara, all the good things happen in samsara happen based on your mind. And especially you should avoid selfish motive and be dedicated to think of others' welfare. And you have to train your mind in the 6 perfections as practitioners of the Bodhisattva Yana. "This being so, I shall hold and guard my mind well. Without the discipline of guarding the mind, what use are many other disciplines?" Verse number 18. So day and night you should check your mind, be vigilant. So as said in the 8 verses, "In all my conduct I will probe my mind." So this is what is referred here also. "Just as I would be attentive and careful to wound when amidst a bustling, uncontrolled crowd, so I should always guard the wound of my mind when dwelling among harmful people." So when you are in a crowd, then you will be very careful not to get hurt if you have some injury. So likewise, it says, "So I should always guard the wound of my mind when dwelling among harmful people." So at all times you should be vigilant of your mind. So of course, when we talk about being in solitude or seeking solitude, solitude here can refer to mental solitude and physical. So physical one is to avoid being in crowds and being in a quiet hermitage. And whereas when you seek mental solitude, then you have to actually restrain your mind from all kinds of disturbing emotions. So otherwise, if you feel like you are in prison while keeping vows, it doesn't help. with all kinds of thoughts going on in your mind. In one of the advice of Papankava, he says that if you are able to practice, there is liberation, even if you are a lay person living a householder's life, like in the case of Marpa Lotsawa. If you are not able to do like that, then even if you live as a hermit, you will not be able to attain nirvana or liberation. So it's Aryadeva says that there is ways of practicing religion. Some listen to the Vedas and also recite the shlokas or the verses from the Vedas, and then others emphasize on the mind. So, for example, in the case of Jain practitioners, go through lots of physical penitence. And then in the Hindu tradition, there are practitioners who listen to Vedas, listening to the sounds of the Vedas. So about 30 or 40 years ago, I knew one Hindu practitioner, and he told me to listen to the Vedas. And I listened to him, actually reciting the Vedas. So I listened to him while he was reciting Vedas very attentively. So there are practitioners who regard the sound of the Vedas as being practice of Dharma, whereas Buddhism deals with the mind, and this is more difficult because of its subtlety. This is what Aryadeva says. So most of us usually recite some prayers and do not actually use our mind to concentrate our mind on. We are rather slackened in this. So because it's more difficult to try to transform your mind. So it's very few people do that. So we can do prayers for hours and hours, but it's just verbal recitation, and we are not thinking about the meaning of the prayers that we recite. It's very few people do that. So even if you were actually thinking of the lines, the meaning of the lines, it would just be reflection. It's like a screening meditation and not really doing a single-pointed concentration practice. So the guarding the mind is primary in Buddhism, because we deal with the mind and transformation of the mind. For that, we need to have the means within the mind. So that's the significance. Should I behave in such a way as this, then whether among the harmful people or even in the midst of women, the steady effort to control myself will not decline. So because of our disturbing emotions, we create karmas to throw ourselves into lower rebirths. It is better to be without wealth, honor, body or livelihood, and it is better to let other virtues deteriorate rather than ever to let the virtues of mind decline. So in verse number 21, there is this reference to women. Of course, the author himself was a monk, and he was giving this teaching to monks, and therefore, from that point of view, he was mentioning women here. Whereas for the bhikshunis and nuns, you could switch this word with men when you are amongst. So this should be, the words should be switched to men in the context of nuns. So in chapter number 8, there is also mention of women to avoid distraction, which is a hindrance to developing concentration. So because the audience for this teaching, this book, Shantideva was giving were monks. So again, you have to switch those references to men if you are a women practitioner, a nun. I know one American woman who's told me that she doesn't like Shantideva because Shantideva is actually criticizing women. O you who wish to guard your minds, I beseech you with folded hands, always exert yourself to guard mindfulness and alertness. So as practitioners of religion, and especially those who train your mind to cultivate bodhicitta, you have to show restraint and refrain from selfish motive and harming others. People who are disturbed by sickness have no strength to do anything useful. Likewise, those whose minds are disturbed by confusion have no strength to do anything wholesome. So you have to show mindfulness and vigilance. Whatever has been learned, contemplated and meditated upon by those whose minds lack alertness. So Shantideva, great master and great learned person as well as great experienced master, just like water in leaking vase, it will not be tainted in. Even those who have such learning, says, faith and willing perseverance, will become defiled by moral fall due to the mistake of lacking alertness. Verse number 26. So if you are not mindful, then you'll forget. For example, in the case of students, if you are not mindful of what you are studying, then you'll forget things. So even if you have with mindfulness, you have kept in your mind what you have studied. It says in verse number 20, even those who have such much learning, faith and willing perseverance will become defiled by moral fall due to the mistake of lacking alertness. So you rather slacken in your effort without being alert. So we make lots of mistakes because of not being alert and vigilant of what we are doing. So even though we didn't intend to make the mistake, we actually do tend to make mistakes because of that. The thieves of unalertness, in following upon the line of mindfulness, will steal even these merits I have firmly gathered, so that I shall then proceed to lower ends. So we talk about monks, for bhikshus being a bhikshu, and then keeping the three types of vows. But if we are not able to be mindful of what we have to keep with regard to these vows, then we will cause all kinds of decline and to our vows. So George Adisha has said that in a day-to-day life, he was not actually going against any of the pratimoksha vows. But then, with regard to the bodhisattva vows, he tends to go against some vows here and there. But then, with regard to tantric vows, he has said that he actually commits all kinds of downfalls in the tantric vows. So we have to be mindful and alert, or an alertness. This host of thieves who are of my own conceptions, disturbing conceptions, will search for good opportunity. Having found it, they will steal my virtue and destroy the attainment of life in a happy realm. So the negative or disturbing emotions are very bad. So we are used to this. And therefore, because of our habit, we don't have to put any effort to experience these negative emotions. So what you have to know is that you show mindfulness, be very alert all the time that this is bad, the negative emotions are bad, that it will cause you harm, ultimately. So studying the philosophical texts is meant for reducing our negative emotions. But when somebody becomes a little bit learned, they become very proud and they disregard or belittle others who are who don't know much about philosophy. So most of the troubles in the world are caused by people who are educated, and they are very hypocritical because of their learning. Instead of being able to use their knowledge for constructive purposes, people tend to use them for destructive purposes. So the more learned they become, the more hypocritical and they become. There are people who come from their Tibetans, perhaps, who come from their homeland. And when they left their homelands, they were not so cunning and clever. But then as they become more and more learned, they become more clever. But
as far as human value is concerned, and those
ene dan kale chik benjora ya geji chugru chir chayundi an del tene chik wangcha de chik leundi ani chagdo ta na tawa namdo che ta tene iji ma je ta tene ni kongro sa ta mang do dos
people whose life very simple.
Minyam chung shin denge de zo an chik sometimes people become very proud when they are sitting, able to sit on a throne and teach, to give teachings to others, and they become so excited with this kind of thing. Then finally, they cause ruin to themselves. So they lie to others. So if you are, if you live as a simple monk or nun, then of course you may be able to live a very honest life. So your study and knowledge of the Dharma, if it goes, if it helps to increase your negative emotions, then it's like the deities turning into devils. Therefore, I shall never let mindfulness depart from the doorway of my mind. If it goes, I should recall the misery of the lower realms and firmly re-establish it there. And verse number 30, through staying in the company of spiritual masters. In Tibetan, we talk about lamas and tulkus. Tulkus referring to the reincarnate teachers. So I usually say that there is a four-part relationship between the Lama and Tulku. So there are Tulkus who may not be Lamas, the reincarnate Lamas, but not Tulku. But there are Lamas, which means that someone is very learned and be experienced in the Dharma and able to keep and preserve and promote the Dharma. So such a person is a Lama, but doesn't have the name of a Tulku or reincarnate teacher. So you have to be careful about people who may be Tulkus but not real Lamas. About 20 or 30 years ago, one Chinese from the mainland China came to see me and told me that in those days some Tibetans come to China proper, claiming themselves to be Dharma Raja, Dharma kings of Dharma. And then the Chinese devotees actually pay their respects to them. And then, after a while, eventually what they had come to China for were women and money. So this is what he told me. So he asked if I could do anything from here. And I responded to him that I'm in India, I cannot do much. But the most important thing is the Chinese themselves should know the criteria of a Lama that the Buddha has actually enumerated. The criteria or the qualifications of a Lama are given in the Vinaya teachings, the scriptures, as well as in the sutras, and then in Tantra. So accordingly, you have to check when someone comes and says they are Dharmarajas, you have to check whether they are real Lamas or not. For weeks, months, and years, you have to check the person well, and then if you find them to be really true, genuine lamas, teachers, masters, then you should take them to be spiritual gurus. Otherwise, not. Until then, just regard them as some spiritual friend. So, verse number 30, through the instructions of abbots and through fear. So these refer to the external and internal factors. So thinking about the sufferings, suffering of suffering and changeable suffering, you and also thinking about the negative consequences of the self-grasping, you should apply yourself to so fearing these things, mindfulness will easily be generated. In fortunate people who practice with respect. In verse number 31, I am ever dwelling in the presence of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are always endowed with unobstructed visions. In verse number 32. So if some kind of a policeman were not around, and sometimes people tend to indulge in crimes. And similarly, because they don't see the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas around themselves, the people, believers, go against their vows and pledges and moral conduct. So even the Buddhas, even the Bodhisattvas who have reached a certain level of Bodhisattva grounds are able to see things through to a certain degree. So because of that, you have to show be So by thinking about the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, their qualities, which mainly thinking that they have become such enlightened beings because of mainly their practice of bodhicitta. And then you will feel respect, pay respect to them. And when you feel respect to them, then of course automatically that also gives rise, inspires you to be faithful or keep your faith in the cultivation of bodhicitta and understanding of emptiness and so forth. Verse number 33. When mindfulness is set with a purpose. So mindfulness referring to being mindful of what to adopt and what to discard, the negative and positive things, of guarding the doorways of the mind, then alertness will come about, and even that which had gone will return. When verse number 33 done. So how do you actually cultivate mindfulness and alertness? Is shown by the next lines. When just as I'm about to act, I see that my mind is tainted with defilements. At such a time, I should remain unmovable, like a piece of wood. So when you are about to indulge in certain negative actions, then you should be mindful. You should remind yourself that you should not do this, and be alert. And then alert and be like a piece of wood. Never should I look around distractedly for no purpose. With a resolute mind, I should always keep my eyes cast downwards. So not be carried away by distraction, is what is shown by this. In order to relax the gaze for a short while, I should look around. You should just keep your gaze at a distance of about a hand span or something. And if someone appears in my field of vision, I should look at them and say, welcome. So don't cast bad glances at them, but greet them well. To check if there is any danger on the path, I should look again in all four directions. If you are in passing through a region where there is lots of landslides, and you should be practical. In other words, this says you should not just say I'm a bhikshu and just go keep your gaze down on the ground alone. To rest, I should turn my head around and then look behind me. Having examined both ahead and behind, I should proceed to either come or go. So this shows that you should be realistic. By knowing the purpose, being aware of the necessity for such mindfulness, for mindful alertness, I should behave like this in all situations. Verse number 39, once having prepared for an action with thought, my body will remain in such a way. Then periodically I should look to see how the body is being maintained. With the utmost effort, I should check to see that the crazed elephant of my mind is not wandering off, but is bound to the great pillar of thinking about the Dharma. So if you are reciting the verse of taking refuge and bodhicitta, the one verse, you should actually think about the meaning of these lines without getting distracted by showing mindfulness and alertness. Verse number 41. So when you are developing concentration, single-pointed concentration, where you actually cultivate to have a single-pointedness of the mind without any distraction, then this is what it's talking about. However, if I'm unable to do this when afraid or involved in celebrations, then I should relax. And at all times, one should always check your mind, where it's going. Likewise, it has been taught that in times of giving one may be neutral. To a certain aspect of moral discipline. So when you are listening to a teaching, for example, here, you should not leave the teaching neutral. So the Buddha has said that when you are engaged in practice of giving, for example, you should focus on that more than other practices like moral discipline. For example, if you are practicing giving fearlessness, a practice of giving fearlessness, in one of the Jataka stories, perhaps it said that one hunter was actually chasing a deer, and then the deer ran by the monk, and once the deer is gone, the hunter came and reached this monk and asked the monk, "Where did this deer go?" And the monk's answer was, of course he saw where the deer went, but if he told the truth, of course as a monk he was not supposed to lie, but in order to practice the giving of fearlessness, or to save, in other words, to save the life of the animal, the monk could have said, I didn't see the animal, or I saw a tree or something. So this is what is mentioned. So when you are practicing the giving of fearlessness or saving someone's life, you should keep this morality neutral. So that's how we could interpret it. I should undertake whatever deed I have intended to do and think of doing nothing other than it. So whatever practice you are doing, focusing on, you have to do that mainly. With my mind applied to that task, I should set about for the time being to accomplish it. By acting in this way, all will be done well. So whatever practice or whatever things you are doing, you have to complete that. And not get distracted here and there so that the work is not completed. But by acting otherwise, neither action will be done. Likewise, there will be no increase in proximate disturbing conceptions that come from a lack of alertness. So, if I happen to be present while a senseless conversation is taking place, or if I happen to seek some kind of spectacular show, I should abandon attachment towards it. If for no reason I start digging the earth, picking at the grass, or drawing patterns on the ground, then by recalling the advice of the Buddha, I should immediately stop out of fear. So as in the Vinaya, whether you are doing some physical action or verbal action, or when you are going to bed, you should keep the vows. So you should do according to the Vinaya. Whenever I have So if you are about to indulge in some kind of a negative action of a body or speech, you should immediately stop and be like a piece of wood. Verse number 50. Whenever I am eager for praise or have the desire to blame others, whenever I have the wish to speak harshly and cause disputes, at all such times I should remain like a piece of wood. Jeez. So with regard to bodhisattva practices, even if something were to cause harm temporarily, but if it brings about in the long term benefit or happiness, then it should be done. If something that you do brings harm in the immediate sense as well as in the long run, then that also, of course, you must avoid such things. And moreover, if something brings about benefit in the short term but brings about disadvantage or harm in the long run, then that should also be avoided. So you have to see the benefits, both the immediate as well as the long-term benefits, and see the pros and cons. So the main practice is to help others, but not to harm others. But even if it may be an action that you may be doing, if that harms others, then you should avoid doing it. If that very action helps others, then you should do it. So you have to check whether something is feasible to do or not, and whether there's a great purpose in doing that or not. And you should see have the whole picture in mind, and then accordingly engage in the actions. So with regard to what is known as faith, there are three types of faith. One is admiring faith. And then once you feel admiration, you actually engage in wishing to actually engage in that practice. And then the third type of faith is the trusting faith, or conviction which comes in relation to things which are rather not accessible to us immediately. So whether it's faith or compassion, you have to develop them with the help of wisdom. So being very resolute and faithful, steady, respectful, and with the sense of shame, apprehensive, and peaceful. I should strive to make others happy. So for beginners, practitioners, when you are not, when you have not gained firm ground in the practices, it says, I should not be disheartened by all the whims of the childish who are in discord with one another. I should know these to arise in their minds due to disturbing conceptions, and therefore be kind towards them. As it said in the 8 verses of mind training, when I see unpleasant beings with unpleasant nature, tormented by different disturbing conceptions and sicknesses, people who are misbehaving, you should not disregard them, you should not ignore them, but be compassionate, especially be compassionate with them. So perhaps this verse refers to that. So people who are indulging in all kinds of negative emotions, jealousy, pride, arrogance, and all this, they are childish. So they create discord between themselves and others and make themselves unhappy. So therefore, be kind towards them, thinking that you need to help them to actually eliminate their negative or disturbing emotions. In doing that, which by nature is not unwholesome, for the sake of myself and other sentient beings, I should always hold my mind fast, acting like an apparition with no sense of self. So you should always make judgment along the line that you should not do anything that harms others, but do things which help others. And so, with in the last line, like an apparition with no sense of self, refers to the meditation on emptiness, cultivate. So we have these negative emotions of desire, attachment, and anger because of this grasping at some kind of independent existing self. So you have to look at these experiences as being like a magical illusion. By thinking again and again that after a long time I have won the greatest leisure, likewise I should hold my mind as utterly unshakable as the king of mountains. So as I said earlier, if we think about this higher rebirth, we can see that there's no animal, no sentient being who outnumbers a human population on this earth who have this brain like we have. We have a language, all kinds of vocabulary, and then by using this language, we have in which we have names, different terms for different things. So we have a very special language that we can use to express different things. We have found this human life, and each and every quality as human beings, the different positive aspects of a human life that we have their individual respective causes and conditions that we have created in the past. So therefore, you have to think. These lines show the difficulty of finding human life and the preciousness of such a human life. So physically, we have a higher rebirth, and then also in terms of our voice, even with regard to the voice, the cats and dogs have certain way of expressing through their voice when they have to mate with their with other the opposite sex. And so also there's the birds also have certain language that they use to express their fear and anger and all this. But then, just like human beings, we can in our language we can actually say express ourselves to say be helpful to others, be not harmful to others, don't harm others, and be helpful to others, which is not what the animals can say. And therefore, if you could help others by harming others by lying or through divisive talk, and also senseless talk. Instead, if you talk nicely, in a good way to others to help them, then we are using our voice in a positive way, making this voice that we have a quality or an attribute of a higher rebirth. Perhaps I should stop here. So verse number 58 is finished.